Now Saul and they, and all the men of Israel, were in the valley of Elah, fighting with the Philistines. And David rose up early in the morning, and left the sheep with the keeper, and took and went as Jesse had commanded him, and he came to the trench, as the host was going forth to the fight, and shouted for the battle. For Israel and the Philistines had put the battle in array, army against army. And David left his carriage in the hand of the keeper of the carriage, and ran into the army, and came and saluted his brethren. And as he talked with them, behold, there came up the champion, the Philistine of Gath, Goliath by name, out of the armies of the Philistines, and spake according to the same words, and David heard them. And all the men of Israel, when they saw the man, fled from him, and were sore afraid. And the men of Israel said, Have ye seen this man that is come up? Surely to defy Israel is he come up. And it shall be that the man who killeth him, the king will enrich him with great riches, and will give him his daughter, and make his father's house free in Israel. And David spake to the men that stood by him, saying, What shall be done to the man that killeth this Philistine, and taketh away the reproach from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine, that he should defy the armies of the living God? And the people answered him after this manner, saying, So shall it be done to the man that killeth him. And Eliab, his eldest brother, heard when he spake unto the man, and Eliab's anger was kindled against David. And he said, Why camest thou down hither? And with whom hast thou left those few sheep in the wilderness? I know thy pride, and the naughtiness of thine heart, for thou art come down that thou mightest see the battle. And David said, What have I now done? Is there not a cause? And he turned from him toward another, and spake after the same manner. And the people answered him again after the former manner. And when the words were heard which David spake, they rehearsed them before Saul, and he sent for him. And David said to Saul, Let no man's heart fail because of him. Thy servant will go and fight with this Philistine. And Saul said to David, Thou art not able to go against this Philistine to fight with him, for thou art but a youth, and he a man of war from his youth. And David said unto Saul, Thy servant kept his father's sheep, and there came a lion and a bear, and took a lamb out of the flock. And I went out after him, and smote him, and delivered it out of his mouth. And when he arose against me, I caught him by his beard, and smote him, and slew him. Thy servant slew both the lion and the bear. And this uncircumcised Philistine shall be as one of them, seeing he hath defied the armies of the living God. David said, Moreover, the Lord that delivered me out of the paw of the lion, and out of the paw of the bear, he will deliver me out of the hand of this Philistine. And Saul said unto David, Go, and the Lord be with thee. And Saul armed David with his armor, and he put a helmet of brass upon his head. Also he armed him with a coat of mail. And David girded his sword upon his armor, and he essayed to go, for he had not proved it. And David said unto Saul, I cannot go with these, for I have not proved them. And David put them off him. And he took his staff in his hand, and chose him 5 smooth stones out of the brook. And he put them in a shepherd's bag, which he had, even in a scrip. And his sling was in his hand, and he drew near to the Philistine. And the Philistine came on, and drew near unto David. And the man that bare the shield went before him. And when the Philistine looked about and saw David, he disdained him, for he was but a youth, and ruddy, and of a fair countenance. And the Philistine said unto David, Am I a dog, that thou comest to me with staves? And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. And the Philistine said to David, Come to me, and I will give thy flesh unto the fowls of the air, and to the beasts of the field. Then said David to the Philistine, Thou comest to me with a sword, and with a spear, and with a shield. But I come to thee in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom thou hast defied. This day will the Lord deliver thee into mine hand, and I will smite thee, and take thine head from thee. And I will give the carcasses of the host of the Philistines this day unto the fowls of the air, and to the wild beasts of the earth, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel. And all this assembly shall know that the Lord saveth not with sword and spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hands. And it came to pass, when the Philistine arose and came and drew nigh to meet David, that David hastened and ran toward the army to meet the Philistine. And David put his hand in his bag, and took thence a stone, and slang it, and smote the Philistine in his forehead, that the stone sunk into his forehead, and he fell upon his face to the earth. So David prevailed over the Philistine with a sling and with a stone, and smote the Philistine, and slew him. But there was no sword in the hand of David. Therefore David ran and stood upon the Philistine, and took his sword, and drew it out of the sheath thereof, and slew him, and cut off his head therewith. And when the Philistines saw their champion was dead, they fled. Samuel 17, verses 19 through 51. The Bible describes King David as a man after God's own heart. Now, many have taken this to mean that they were referring to David, the peaceful little shepherd boy. David was fearless. Shepherds at this time that were minding sheep were greatly valued, and in many ways were more formidable than even soldiers were. Because at that time, war had certain rules. There's no rules when you go after a lion, other than come home alive. Same goes for a bear. Many have asked me, Florida Maquis, aren't you afraid that they're going to this, that they're going to that with your channel, or they're going to close you down, or they're going to take this from us, and they're going to take our rights and all this kind of stuff? Sometimes God will put a Goliath in your life for you to find the David within you. I chose an image on the right that was probably acceptable for this particular platform, but make no mistake, pulling out a sword and doing what was described in Samuel would have been a terrifying thing to see. And here, so many years later, we see the son of David again, fashioning a scourge and chasing those who would cheat people out of the temple using violence. See, a scourge isn't just a whip. It's a whip that has little hooks in the end of it. And this is what he did. You see, David, when he saw Goliath, didn't drop to his knees and ask God to give him strength and ask God to send a lightning bolt. David ran toward him. Jesus didn't go into the money changers and reason with them and tell them why it was wrong for them to be cheating people. So let me be very clear about something for those of you who would begin casting stones and aspersions at the Patriot Nurse or Jennifer Veterans for Truth or me for promoting them. First of all, he that is without sin among you, let him first cast a stone at her. These young women are both daughters of the living God, blood-bought and sanctified. Go after them at your peril, lest you want a visit from one of those angels. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. I don't fear what they're going to do to me. I don't fear what you might threaten to do to me. Because my Bible teaches me this is coming and to not be afraid of it. For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, and of love, and of a sound mind. See, there came so many years later, many, many more powerful. Augustus, Tiberius, Caligula, Claudius, Nero, Pontius Pilate, Herod, Pharaoh. The list goes on, but we know who the real enemy is. The light bearer. See, he's going to illuminate everything you should be afraid of. Now, I want to ask you guys a question. When the giants and their armies come, you going to be sitting on the couch smoking weed? 7 January 2022, Taliban weed about to attract millions in foreign investment. Just so you know who you're standing with. You see, Pharaoh has already said he's losing patience with you. What's going to happen when you go to Pharaoh and say, let my people go, and he doubles your workload? He makes you go harvest the straw to make the bricks. You just going to smoke another one? Make it all go away? Because make no mistake, giants are coming. Giants and armies are coming. Are you going to have the fire of a shepherd boy in your belly to go run to meet them? Or are you just going to sit back and say, oh, it would have been better had we stayed in Egypt? See, giants are real. This is one that lived during my lifetime, and believe me, I met the man. Terrifying moment in my life. Never been so terrified in my life. If you'd like to get read in on how you can defeat a giant, sign up at Patreon. It's $1. $1. And believe me, if you don't think it's worth it, I'll refund your dollar. I've done it to many people. It's my promise to you. You see, there you can direct message me. You can look at the content and say, you know what? I still think you're full of it up to your ears, Mucky. I want my $1 back. Not a problem. Couple clicks and it's right back at you. It's still collapsing, by the way. Your make-believe currency. The one that you're pushing, sitting at the temple. Cheating people. And they're even saying now, Bitcoin price tumbles and no signs of a decisive reversal in sight. Pardon me. Hedge fund risk manager says. You see, this man, many people don't realize who he was and how big and how strong he was. See this little blonde guy on the left? This little blonde guy on the left is 6'7", 302 pounds. This guy picked him up like he was a sack of potatoes and tossed him on the ground. There's another story. Actually, here's a better view. About Schwarzenegger. See, Andre the Giant insisted on paying whenever they would get together and go out to eat as a group. He insisted on it. Well, Schwarzenegger went behind his back and paid once. And Andre, in a rage, picked up Schwarzenegger and threw him onto the top of his limousine. That's how big and strong. You see, you look at him and he's not all cut like guys that work out. This guy was probably the strongest man that ever lived. At least in the modern world. Goliath was far larger. Goliath was far larger than even Andre the Giant was, based on the descriptions of the Bible. So I ask again, are you going to be ready when God puts a Goliath in your life to fight? And I'll leave it there. God bless. Like, share, subscribe, and we'll see you guys next time.